closing. Hello, and thank you for joining us for another edition of Coffee with Tom and Joanne. I'm Joanne Taranto.
And I'm Tom Matthews, and we're continuing our buyer series. And today we're up to the final walkthrough and the closing.
Yeah.
And typically these happen like in conjunction with each other. But this is an exciting time because now the seller's moved out, the house is vacated, and we want to talk about why we do a final walkthrough and then what to expect at the closing. So Joanne, why and when do you do a final walkthrough?
So the final walkthrough is done to be sure that the house is left in the condition that was agreed to in the purchase and sale. So we want to make sure that it's in broom swept condition. If that's what the provision was in the purchase and sale, we want to make sure that the seller has removed all of their belongings, not forgotten anything,
Right?
but also maybe not taken something that they thought they were supposed to move but should have stayed behind. We see this with like washers and dryers.
Right.
Washers and dryers are personal property. A lot of times they are included in the sale. A lot of times they are excluded. And we want to do this final walkthrough so that we make sure that the house is in the condition that you expected it to and that it has not had any damage done to it between the last time you saw it and when you're going to sign the papers. So a final walkthrough, we can do this. You can do it the night before the closing if your closing is early in the morning, or you can do it right before the closing and then head straight to the closing afterwards. And it's a time where you, the buyer, meet us and we walk through the house and just make sure that everything is good.
Yeah.
So what are the kind of things that we do when we're walking through?
We're going to test the water. We're going to turn on the appliances, flush the toilets. Typically, this appointment is going to take anywhere from 15 minutes to 30 minutes. And we're going to walk around, like Joanne said, make sure nothing was taken, nothing was damaged. That happens. Typically, we find that we work with brokers who are very transparent. So that if something does happen, that a mover damages a wall or kicks in a door, that we know about it ahead of time and can address for that with some type of compensation. But at this final walkthrough, we're just making sure that the house is in the condition we expect it to be in. Now, one of the biggest questions that buyers ask at the walkthrough is, can I have my key? And this is an important thing for people to hear. You can't have the key until after you sign the paperwork and the deed is recorded at the registry of deeds. Only at that point can you get the key. So at this final walkthrough, if there's a lockbox, the key will remain in the lockbox. If there's not a lockbox, the key remains with the listing agent.
You can't bring things to the final walkthrough that you're going to move into the house.
Everything, the house is not yours until the deed is recorded. So we've done our final walkthrough. The house looks great. What happens next, Joanne?
We're headed to closing. Yay!
Transaction.
So the closing takes place with the closing attorney. So this may or may not be the same attorney that you used for the purchase and sale, but the role of the attorney at the closing is to represent the bank if you have a mortgage. And what they do is they receive all of the documentation, the mortgage, the note, all the disclosures from the bank, and they're in charge of getting all of that paperwork signed and recorded. So what you expect when you get to a closing, you need to bring your ID. So you need a license. We recommend you bring your personal checkbook just in case there are any small adjustments that need to be done at the closing table. And I would expect that a closing, I would allot about an hour's time to do it.
And typically the rest of the money, so if you're doing 5% down, your money's in escrow. If you're doing 20% down, you've either wired the money to the attorney the day before, or you're bringing a bank check, a certified bank check, because that's another question we get all the time. Can I bring a personal check to the closing? And the answer is no. You have to have the money because once that deed's recorded, the house is yours and the money belongs to the seller or to pay off their bank. So you have to make sure you brought in a certified check that's made out either to yourself or to the closing attorney that is signed over to them at the closing. But that's an important thing. And the other thing I want people to know is be relaxed. The closing, you don't need to come dressed up. You can be wearing sweatpants. I mean, this is like you might be planning to move afterwards. And that's like an important question people ask too is, when do I have access to the house? So a lot of attorneys we work with do what's called electronic filing. So if you're getting a mortgage, the key with getting to into the house quickly is that mortgage needs to be funded. If that money is funded, it's in the IALTA account for the attorney. Once it goes to record, you can have access to the house. So if you sign at 9 in the morning, it's fairly realistic that you can be on record by noon time.
Yeah.
And as soon as you're on record, we give you access to the house with the key and you get to go in. Now, if there are anything hiccups where the money is not there yet, waiting on some documentation, you could have to wait until 4 o'clock to access the house. And those things happen, they come up.
Yep.
But like
the registry closes at 4.
4, yeah.
So by the very latest that day, you would have your keys in hand by 4.
Yeah.
However, what happens if it can't get to record by 4?
If it can't get to record by 4, there are 2 kind of options. One is we just wait until it goes to record the next day. The other option is there's something called gap insurance, where attorneys can close in what's called gap. And that insurance provides the seller the security that you are going to go to record the next day and to give you the keys so you can have access. Because we don't recommend you scheduling your carpet cleaners or your Comcast people the same day of closing.
Please don't do that.
But inevitably, everyone does. And so it creates this kind of stressful time where they need access. You, the buyer, needs access to the home, but you don't have access. And so, you know, if you're watching this video and you're kind of taking steps to prepare yourself, schedule those people the next day. Spend that first day just kind of taking things in and allowing for the imperfections of humanity to kick in.
Right.
Because things can go wrong. And by giving yourself that, taking that stress away, you can really make this process enjoyable. And that's what we want. Because we have seen situations where the closing can ruin a tremendous process because people didn't have the proper
expectations, thought they were going to have the keys by noon. And you just have to, this is part of the process. And this, you know, human error happens. Sometimes, you know, there are things that come up at a closing that are outside of our control and they need to be dealt with. What if a, you know, tree fell in the house the night before closing?
Or a mistake on the documentation.
A mistake on the documentation we need to re-sign. Things happen. It's not that often, but things happen. So we want you to be prepared that if you go to closing, that it's going to be a few hours until your documentation is on paperwork. If it's registered land, oftentimes it will take longer to record because you can't electronically record those closings. So we just want you to have the expectation that it may take a little bit of time to get the keys. And as long as you know that, you can roll with it.
Exactly. Anything can be dealt with in real estate if you know about it.
Right.
The surprises are what cause the stress and the anger and the frustration. And that's why we're recording these videos, is we want to eliminate that. We want to make this process transparent so that you can have a great experience buying a home.
Absolutely.
So if you like this content, please subscribe. And for buyers, Joanne and I are actively taking on new buyer clients. So feel free to reach out to us. But thank you for watching another edition of Coffee with Tom and Joanne. I'm Tom Matthews.
And I'm Joanne Taranto. Cheers.